In this video, we're going to be talking about Blender lights. We're going to talk about HDRI, sun, sky texture, physical lights, emissions, bloom, also glass and combining lights, and I'll give you some tips on add-ons, which I would suggest. Now, first of all, cycles and Eevee are going to behave a bit differently in terms of lighting, and we're going to be talking about it in depth in the next section, where we're going to be talking about cycles, rendering engine settings and features and tricks and tips, and Eevee as well. So we're going to talk about it then, but there is a general rule that, lights behave very differently in both engines, because two different engines. Eevee is a real-time engine. It's actually fake lighting, fake shadows, fake everything, whereas Cycles is, it's a ray tracing engine. So let's talk about HDRI. Now, HDRI is a basic way of adding lights to Blender. So when you expand here and go to shader editor and go to world, you'll probably see, two nodes. Now, if you have this Node Wrangler add-on enabled here, which should be enabled in your Blender at all times, you can simply click here, Ctrl T, and get this node tree, and you can plug your HDRI texture here. Now, you can get free HDRI textures on HDRIHeaven.com, but I would also recommend you get fantastic studio textures by Alex Sensual, and you can get them on Gumroad. So when you click here, you can, load in HDRI texture you got from internet. In my case, I'm going to add Abandoned Slipaway. It's a very flat texture. And if you would like to see that in Cycles, go to Cycles and simply make sure that it's enabled here. So transparency, is off. Now, if you're going to be in orthographic mode, you're not going to be able to see that. So make sure in perspective here in the top, right? The usual way I work with HDRI is I simply, create a scene, add some material, right, and then I have some model on top of it, and let me just zoom in here closer, and you then adjust your lighting accordingly. And once you do, I simply turn it off because I don't need to see that. So if you want to, for example, rotate the light around your scene, you'll be using this rotation on Z-axis and simply move it. I would recommend you switch to Eevee because it's going to be much quicker. Then you set your angle. Once you do, you switch back to Cycles. See if you're looking, if you're looking good. And if you do, just switch it off because it's easier on the system and you don't really need to see that. Some HDRI textures needs a bit of a bump in terms of power. You can do it in here. So for instance, I often go 1.2 or 1.5, which gives me a bit more light. But I will give you additional tricks and tips in terms of node setup here to create different effects in terms of setting HDRI in this cycle section. So in the next video, okay? This is just a general overview of, what we have basically available. For example, you could mix HDRI texture with the sun. So we could add sun here to your scene, right? Add it somewhere here, rotate it, and, bump the strength to maybe like 10 or something, or maybe let's make it, I don't know, 200, and then you're gonna have sun in your scene. Let's just increase the roughness here so you can actually see the reflection, the shadows. There you go. Now I'm combining sun with HDRI texture. So that will be one way of lighting your scene. I usually don't use the sun, I just use, just HDRI texture, and what I do is I simply use a reflector. If I want to have more light on this side, I simply will create, a reflector here, like this, right? And create a different matte, make it brighter, and this will reflect my light back onto my object, so I can very easily, dial down how much light I want to get back. I want to bounce back onto my object. So this is how I work in most cases. So another way of lighting your scene would be to swapping this HDRI with sky texture. So you go here to world, and under color, you can simply choose sky texture, right? Now let me show you how it looks, okay? So sky texture is a very interesting thing. You can adjust sun elevation. Let's drop it down so you can actually see that. And you can adjust sun rotation. So we can actually see the sun, in our viewport. You can change sun disk size and also intensity. Usually I will drop it like 0.3 or something because strength 1 is a bit too strong. And now what you can do, the cool thing about it is that you can combine this with the sun. So if I'm gonna go here to lights and drop a sun, right? Now my sun actually shines in a different direction and different strength, but there is an add-on in Blender that allows you to actually combine them both. So if you go here and go to sun position, enable this add-on, when you then go here to world and scroll down, you'll see it in here. And if you plug this sun to sun and sky texture to sky texture, then you're gonna be able to operate them together in as one. So go here in this section you can add also the sky texture here, or you can add HDRI. But now you can see that sun is aligned with the sky texture. So if I go here and I'm going to drop the sun elevation to something, you know, sunsetish, my sun and my sky texture are aligned, okay? And here you can adjust the, you know, amount of air the sun is going through. You can add some ozone to give it some, you know, color cast from the sky. You can add some dust, you know, you could create some really interesting effects, okay? This is a fantastic way of actually lighting your scene, and I have quite a few renders created this way. The sky texture will not work in Eevee, but the sun will work in Eevee. So if you want to use that in Eevee, the sky texture will not show there. It's only showing in Cycles, okay? Another way of adding lights to Blender will be by creating emissions. And, you know, you could change this, for example, into an emissive cube. Now this cube will cast reflections, but it will not really cast light, okay? So if you want to add light to it, you would need to add artificial light. So in this case, what I would do is I would move cursor to face, and I would add, for example, area light, and, you know, point it down, make it a little bit larger, and then adjust the strength of it. So go here and, you know, pump the strength to actually cast some light onto this, you know, this area, and then you could copy it to each of these faces. When you, for example, want to copy lights across your scene and you want to adjust them at the same time, instead of using Shift D, right, use Alt D. Okay, you're gonna create an instance, Alt D X, and now if I'm gonna adjust one light, you know, both of them gonna get adjusted. It goes to strength, size, everything. Okay, so this is really convenient when you, for example, have some lights arrayed. Also, you can bind lights to an empty. So if I'm gonna, you know, create an empty here and move it in here, and I'm going to grab these two lights, this one, and Control P and Object Cube Transform, I can then move this one with all the lights. This is very convenient for creating scenes with a lot of lights in them, okay? Now bloom, the way you create bloom in Eevee is very easy, because you simply go to Eevee, you know, and you turn on bloom. And in Cycles, like I mentioned a few times in this course, what you need is go to Compositor, and you need to enable glare, okay? And this will show only after the image has been rendered, alright? So if you drop glare here and change streaks to fog glow, and, you know, change the quality to high, then after you render your image, then the compositor will kick in, and then the glare is gonna kick in. So the way to adjust compositor effects is after the render is finished. So you can just simply adjust things and, you know, change colors or brightness, darkness, etc. with compositor on a live render. So when the live render is finished, you simply start adjusting it. Now, with glass is an interesting thing. If in terms of glass, if you want to use glass in Eevee, I would highly recommend going with definitely Eevee Materials, because it's an add-on that is working with KitOps. Both are by Chip Walters. You can get them on his store on Blender Market or Gumroad. There are links in the PDF file like I mentioned. So if I wanted to do this in Eevee with the definite Eevee Materials, I simply go here and, you know, add mod to this object in Eevee, and you're gonna have glass in Eevee. And you can, you know, create different types of glass in here, you know, whatever you wish. Now in Cycles, it looks a little bit differently, and I'll put more emphasis on Cycles, because I think Cycles produces better, you know, renders. It's more realistic, although Eevee has its uses, especially for outdoor scenes and scenes when you want to use some wet, you know, surfaces, volumetrics. Eevee is actually pretty good, and there are quite a few tricks you can use in Eevee to make it look almost like Cycles, and I'm going to be discussing this again in separate videos, but I want to show you a few tricks in terms of glass in Cycles. Okay, so let's just remove that, and let's reset this scene to 0. So it's going to be a clean slate. I'm going to add a plane here, make it larger, and add a cube. Actually, add a plane. We're going to rotate it and make it larger. And now, the way you set up glass in Cycles is quite easy. You could just use hardups for it. So Alt-M and simply end blank matte. You're going to add just regular matte, but if you're going to hold Shift, you wanna get glass. So Alt-M is hardup, shift click, And just gonna make it quicker because you're gonna add a few nodes. Now, I don't use the general hard up setups for glass. I remove these nodes because I don't need them. I'm adding light path here to this mixture, okay? So you got transparent, glass, mix shader, and light path, okay? And you plug in the in shadow ray here. And what you want to do is you want to swap these two here. So glass on the top and transparent on the bottom. What it will do, it will allow this glass not only to let the light shine through, but it also will allow the sun from, for example, HDRI texture to shine through, which is really important. And we're going to be using this glass in the later practical part of this tutorial, where I'm going to be using similar setup. So now if if I plugged here this kind of like a sun HDRI, so let's say this one, and I went to cycles, you will see that the sun will actually shine through it, and you're gonna be able to see that. Actually, let's grab a different one. Let's go to Spiaggia. There we go. Now you see that it's actually been casting sort of like a shadow through that window. So now if you're gonna go here and adjust the roughness of it, right? If you're gonna go here, drop the roughness to something really low, like maybe, really low, you'll be able to see the world through this glass, and the sun's gonna be able to shine through. So if you, for example, put something in front of this glass, right, it's actually gonna be shining the shadow through the glass, which is really important for realism, right? So you see what I mean? That's how it works, right? Now the problem with glass in cycles is that if you have, for example, a glass that has, let me just prepare a different scene here very quickly, right? So let's just remove this metallic. Let's go with a rough surface, make it a bit darker, okay? Cool. We're gonna grab a cylinder here and put it somewhere here, make it larger, and remove this face from the top. I'm going to sharpen this, and I'm going to solidify it very quickly, right? And I'm going to add some bevel, okay? So now what I want to do is I want to remove this, let's remove this HDRI for a second, and let's just add the regular light, okay? So let's add the regular light, like a point light, for example, put it somewhere here, and make it really strong, okay? Let's say 4000, okay? And now what I want to do is I want to, I want to change this into a glass, okay? So again, Alt-M, Shift-click, let's go to Object, and let's change these nodes very quickly back to, what we were using before. So swap them around and just add the light path here. So light path and connect the in shadow ray, boom, right? Now you can see that the light is shining through, but if I'm gonna, for example, add some shapes to it, right? These shapes will not be showing through the glass, okay? See what I mean? They're not showing through. So you need to enable a few things to make it actually happen, okay? So what you want to do is you want to go to light, the object and the background, and you want to enable shadow caustics. So click that on, then go to glass, right? Go to this panel here and go to shading, right? And enable cast shadow caustics, and here you need to enable receive shadow caustics, and then you're gonna be able to see that the shape is being cast onto the surface. That's a really cool trick. And if you're using some kind of a glass with some kind of a detail on it, this is how you cast these details on the surface. Of course, in Eevee this will not work because again Eevee is a fake engine, so this trick will not work in Eevee. And that's a very new feature of Blender 3.0 and above. So if you're using this Blender, you can achieve this effect. Another cool effect with lights, what you can do is you can actually project textures onto the ground. So I've been actually mentioning this in one of the videos, but I want to show you something really cool. So if I'm gonna grab a light here and I'm gonna put it somewhere here, right? And I'm gonna angle it down here and make it larger. And let's make it actually a bit smaller, so kind of narrower like this, right? So now I want to add texture to this light here. So the way to do that would be to click on Use Nodes. You need to be an object here in Shader Editor. Click here and Control T, and let's just remove these two nodes, and we're gonna add a geometry nodes, okay? And plug this parametric to vector, okay? And then what you want to do is enable a texture. Now I'll show you. I'll prepare the texture, which is basically our logo. It's on a black background and it has white letters, right? So Brostech Hard Surface Solutions. Now what you need is something white that you want to show and something black that you want to conceal. It's just like in Photoshop, black conceals, white reveals. So basically this black texture is going to be alpha, texture is going to be invisible, and what you're going to see is BrowStack and the bottom part, yeah? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug that texture here to this, to this node, yeah? So I'm going to go here and plug it in. Then I'm going to go here and I'm going to increase the power of this light to like, 7,000, okay? Now you can see that it's not working, and the reason why it's not working is because the spread is so crazy. Let's change the spread to, maybe 1 degree, and now you see that something is happening. Now this text is a bit flipped, so what we're gonna do is RZZ and 90, and then we're going to RXX or YY and scale it down, and RY and scale it wide. And then you have projection on the ground, which is pretty bloody cool. And there you go. Now the closer you're gonna be to the ground, probably the sharper this image is gonna become. You could also change the radius of it here a little bit, right? And you could drop this light closer to the ground, and the closer to the ground you're gonna get, the more crisp the reflection is gonna be, and the further away you're gonna go from the ground, the more blurry this is gonna be, right? So that's how it works, right? And this is a really cool way of projecting, like neons or like some kind of graphics on the floor or some ground, wherever, when you're creating some renders. Then, you can combine lights. So you can combine lights like, the Blender lights, the regular one, with, for example, IES lights. So if I'm going to add another light here, right, let's say point light, okay, and I'm going to drop it somewhere here. And I wanted to change it to a realistic light. What I want to do is go here to use nodes. And I want to, go to strength and then grab this IES texture. And what you want to do is load the texture from internet. So just Google IES textures on the internet, right? Go here and, go to IES textures, and let's say that we want something like a traditional bulb or something, right? Boom, right? And you're going to be able to combine lights together if you want to, right? Create some really cool, cool effects like that. And the last thing we're going to talk about is add-ons. So one of them I showed you already, it's a Sun Position, that's Blender native add-on. The other one is going to be Photographer, and you have a link to that add-on in the PDF file provided with project files. I have a video on that add-on, but the video is quite outdated, and I would suggest you go on a creator's website and look into this. This add-on is very robust, and if you're really serious about, creating some very realistic lighting, like for example for ArcViz or something, that's gonna be a very helpful add-on for you. It comes also with light presets that follow the realistic light fall off, etc. And there's one more add-on called Extra Lights, which is gonna basically allow you to load extra lights to your Blender. I don't have it in here, I think, but I think I have it in this Blender, I think. Let me just check. There you go. So these lights here, right, they come from the add-on Extra Lights, right? And here you have presets. For example, you get the moonlight, direct sun, candle, different types of incandescent light, so tungsten light. Then you got LED lights and fluorescent lights. So you have all kinds of different lights here that come as a preset, and they're more realistic, much more realistic than these ones, and you don't have to fiddle with settings. So this is also a very cool add-on. Now the last tip I'll give you is how to create depth in the image with volumetrics. It's different for Eevee and for Cycles. We're going to be discussing this separately in the Eevee and Cycles videos respectively, so I'm just going to be quick here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some light. So let's grab a point light and let's move it to somewhere here. Let's pump power here to 6000, and let's go to render settings. So let's go to Eevee, all right? And let's turn off this HDRI because we don't need it, right? So let's go to world and let's just unplug this. What we do need is volumetrics, yeah? So Shift A, go here and type principled volume and plug it in, not this one. Just type volume, principled, that's the one. Principled volume, plug volume to volume, and everything gonna go pitch black because it's too dense. Switch it to 0.003 and you'll see you're gonna get this nice dispersion, right? And that's what's going to add a lot of depth into your image. And there's a lot of stuff you can do with compositing, adding like particles of dust and all that. But again, I'll show you how to do it in a separate video. Now in Cycles, this works very differently. You add a cube that's encompassing the entire scene and the camera, right? And you simply add a mod to this cube, right? And you change the this principled BSDF for volume, okay? So principled volume, and you plug it in here, and you get the same result, okay? You see, it's gonna change into fog, and then you simply lower the density of it, okay? And you get the same result, but you need to switch it to Cycles now, okay? So Cycles, boom, and you got volumetrics in Cycles. And the cool thing about it is that you can stack this effect, okay? And you can also add some color to it. It's, you know, pretty cool stuff, okay? So, what again, I'm gonna show you some cool tricks with it and some additional, you know, node setup for Compositor, where you can create some additional depth to your image in a separate video. So this would be everything in terms of lighting for Blender, Cycles, and Eevee. Like I said, Eevee behaves completely differently than Cycles, so you need to play with these things. Now remember that, for example, stuff like IES texture, sky texture will not work for Eevee because Eevee, you know, is a very different beast. So, you know, that's not working over there. But you can create really good renders with either of these engines. Like, for instance, this is rendered in Eevee, and this is rendered in Cycles. If you're going for photorealistic renders, I would suggest going with Cycles. Now, Eevee has kind of like a stylized game-like, you know, sort of a vibe to it. So if you're going for more like a, I don't want to say artificial, but more like an atmosphere like you have in games, when you play games, you want to go with Eevee. And if you want to have something photorealistic, I would suggest Cycles. Eevee is really good for exteriors, especially when you're rendering something with smoke, volumetrics, you know, wet surfaces, etc. And Cycles, you know, can be used in either situation. So it's not really which one is better, but it's basically down to which one is more suitable for the render you're going for. So when you think about rendering, just don't think about which one is better or faster. Think about what you really want to, you know, achieve, what kind of result and effect you're going for. If you're going for something very realistic, I would suggest Cycles, and if you're going for something a bit more stylized, Eevee is brilliant. And now in next videos, I'm going to show you settings that I use for both render engines, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks with nodes and also with Compositor. So with all this knowledge, you should be able to create some